We want to get started in 3 more minutes. Time is of the essence. I've got as many ballots out as I possibly can. When this is over with, I will try to get the rest of the ballots out to people that don't have them. If you have a yellow ballot, you are not a member. But we're going to allow you to vote. Your vote won't count for the endorsement. The white ballots are our members. That's the ballots that count for our endorsement. But I want the general population to be able to vote in this. I'm curious, I don't even will even release that part of it, but I'm curious to know how different the general population is from our members. Okay? I've got to have your attention, please. We're getting ready to start the meeting. Is Pastor Kern here? Okay, Steve, would you come, please? If I could get TW up here, if I could get Randy Brogdon and James Lankford up here, I need you at the front table, ASAP. If everyone will please stand. Get my phone turned off. Up here in the second seat here. I'm going to ask Pastor to lead us in prayer, and then David Swafford, wherever you are, if you'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance following that. Pastor Carter.
Let's pray. Father, we come in the name of Jesus, and we thank you for the opportunity to come here together today. We thank you, Lord, for the freedom that we have to choose our own elected officials that represent us. Lord, we pray that you will give wisdom in the questions asked and the answers given. We do pray, Lord, for our nation. We pray, Father, for your mercy towards us, for we have sinned in many different ways. But we know, Lord, that you can bring a renewing and a restoration. And so, Lord, we thank you for the food, the fellowship, all the things that we enjoy, the prosperity that we enjoy. We do pray, Lord, for our troops in harm's way. We pray for this nation, our leadership. There's so many things that are going on. They need wisdom, Lord. And we just pray that in and through it all, that you would be glorified, and that, Lord, we would turn our hearts to thee. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if you can get in your seats as quickly as possible. James is third, TW is second. Yeah, follow the signs. Senator Brogdon, I don't know where you are, but you need to be up here. Folks, please listen to the format of this. Please, this is not a time to visit. The meeting has started. Time is of the essence here. We really try to get this done in an hour. We need an hour and a half. The format will be this. They've already drawn. Brogdon will go first, Shannon second, Lankford third. They'll each have 5 minutes to tell us anything they want. Following their speeches, we'll do a Q&A, and all questions must be asked from the microphone. We'll have 30 minutes for Q&A. I'm going to ask everyone to limit your question no more than 15 seconds. If you try to make a speech, I'll stop you. And I know I'm the biggest problem here in this, okay? Thanks for that, Steve. 30 minutes Q&A time. I'm going to ask our speakers to answer those as quickly, succinctly, and substantively as possible. And then we will have a 1-minute wrap-up. Senator Brogdon goes first. We'll rotate. Each candidate will speak first. There'll be no questions directed to only one. All candidates will answer all 3 questions. That's the format. We'll wrap up with a 1-minute closing for these 3 candidates. It'll stay in the rotation. If you've been attacked, that's your great time to answer for the attack. Okay? And then I'm going to ask you to do something. It's going to be the toughest thing in the world. Please remain silent for 3 minutes. When we start the voting, if you start talking, you will slow that process down. We need people to vote as quickly as possible. If you've not received a yellow ballot yet, and you're not a member, come up afterwards and get a yellow ballot from me. If you're a dues-paying member and you haven't received a white ballot yet, come up and get that immediately when we start the vote count. I've got volunteers on the various tables to collect the ballots and get them over to our counting table. We want to determine if we have to have a runoff or not. We're not even going to count the yellow ballots now, but you get to get them in. It's the white ballots will determine whether we have a runoff. I don't want half of our members to have to go back to work and we find out we need a runoff vote. So we're going to get started. We have a lot of dignitaries here. I apologize for not taking the time to introduce you. I'm not going to do any more than introduce these candidates and start with them immediately. Our first speaker will be former State Senator Randy Brogdon, gubernatorial candidate, now candidate for the United States Senate. Please welcome him, Senator Brogdon. You have 5 minutes to tell us anything you want. I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
Well, you guys had nothing else to do today, or what? Is anybody working? Hey, what a great opportunity to get together with believers, with people who actually appreciate, love liberty, and I know the OCPAC group is a stalwart supporter of freedom, and that's exactly what I have been doing for the last decade of my life. Let me tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing. Well, first of all, I recognize that the greatest threat to our liberty and our economic prosperity is coming from Washington, D.C. We have a lot of problems around this country because of the bad decisions of politicians in Washington. I'm not going to D.C. to try and manage the mess. I want to help dismantle it. And I think it's important, if we don't change directions, and I mean relatively quick, we're going to be in trouble. Our kids and our grandkids will not have the same economic future as what we had growing up. There are two things that you're going to hear me talk about throughout this campaign. Two very basic things. Stopping the debt and stopping the federal overreach. I believe every one of us in this room understands that we are spending ourselves into oblivion. Our kids are in trouble financially, again, because of Washington, D.C. We should not have to wake up every morning wondering what the IRS is going to do to us today. Wondering what the EPA is going to do. Wondering how many jobs and businesses the EPA runs out of the state of Oklahoma and out of the United States and overseas. Bad decisions by politicians, not thinking through into the future. We have too many elected officials that care about their re-election rather than our future. I promise you one thing. As a United States Senator, my mission is the same today as it was a decade ago when I entered into public service. It is to protect our God-given rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is important to me to be able to secure those blessings of liberty one more time and to hand them down to my kids and to your kids' generation. Folks, it's our time. This mantle has now fallen on our shoulders. It's our responsibilities to pick the liberty message up and move it forward. This next hour or so, you're going to hear some very similar topics, some very similar answers. As a matter of fact, I know both of these gentlemen would tell you the same thing that I'm getting ready to say. We're Christians, first and foremost. I know James and TW both would share their faith with you, just like I will. We're all going to tell you that we're family men. We love our families, and what we're doing it for our families. We're also going to tell you that we're Republicans, and we're also going to tell you that we're conservative. So how in the world are you supposed to make your mind up on who to vote for? Well, I think the best way to do that is to look at our voting records. We each have one. And throughout this forum today, I'm going to do my best to expose my voting record to you. And I'm going to do my best to expose their voting record to you. Because they're different. They're different than mine. And if I was just going to grade each one of us, I have, Speaker Shannon has a 74%, Representative Lankford has a 71% conservative vote average. I have a 93%. Now, why is that important? Why do you care about how conservative we are? Well, because I believe conservative principles are Republican principles. They are based on the rule of law. They are based on limited government, individual liberty, and personal responsibility. So I ask you today, if you haven't made your mind up in this race, pay close attention to the answers. Pay close attention to the questions and see how we respond to those. And I want to offer my service to you. Washington, D.C. has never been on my bucket list. This is not something I want to do. It's something I must do. And with your help, with your support, I'd be honored to serve you as the United States Senator. God bless you, and thank you for being here today.
Our next candidate is U.S. Congressman James Lankford, U.S. Representative. I'm sorry. We need you guys to switch, if you would, please.
Okay.
PW, I need you in the middle.
I'm sorry. Take the name tag with it.
I know you all couldn't tell, matching the signs up with the guys here. And it's my fault. Our next candidate is former Speaker of the House and current State Representative T.W. Shannon, also currently candidate for the United States Senate. Welcome, T.W. Shannon.
Thank you, Charlie, for that introduction. Fellow patriots, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here with you and to share with you my heart and the reason I'm running for the United States Senate. As has been mentioned, I've served the state of Oklahoma as the former Speaker of the House, and I've said before, if God were to give me but 4 months to live, I'd want to spend them in the House of Representatives as the Speaker of the House, because they were the longest 4 months of my life. But I will tell you, while I was there as Speaker, we stood in the gap for conservative principles. We were able to do some things that we've talked about as Republicans for a very, very long time. We passed a budget in the state of Oklahoma while I was Speaker. We did it without taking on new debt. And I think that Senator Brogdon mentioned it well. He mentioned that the debt is going to be a big issue in this next election, and I've got a record of standing against debt in the state of Oklahoma. We said no. It's always tempting to take out the state credit card or the federal credit card to pay for benefits for people now that our kids and grandkids have to pay for later. We stood against that when I was Speaker of the House. That's not rated on OCPAC's scoring card, or certainly we reference it and we pay close attention to it. There are a lot of things that it doesn't cover while you're Speaker and while you're an elected official. Also, while I was Speaker of the House, we said no to the Obamacare Medicaid expansion. We did it while I was Speaker. We did it in the House of Representatives because I fundamentally believe that we need to get the federal government out of health care. That's the biggest challenge that we're facing right now. When it comes to our spending and our debt, which I do believe are the top issues of our country, we need somebody that's going to go to Washington, D.C. and say no to the out-of-control spending and the out-of-control debt, $17.5 trillion, and that doesn't include the unfunded entitlement programs in Washington. In fact, every child born in this country right now is going to inherit $174,000 worth of debt. Let me say it again, $174,000 worth of debt because of the decisions that are being made in Washington, D.C. They're going to inherit that without receiving one benefit from it. Not one benefit. We're receiving those benefits right now because of decisions that are being made. And fundamentally, I believe if we're not careful, we will be the first generation of Americans to allow our kids and grandkids to inherit a lower standard of living because of our unwillingness to face the debt. That's unacceptable to me in the greatest country in America, the greatest country in the world. I certainly believe in American exceptionalism. It's something that we don't need to just talk about, but we need to show the rest of the world. The other issue that I think is critically important, there is one area where I don't believe we need to decrease spending, and that's in the area of supporting our military and making sure we have a strong United States military. In fact, raise your hand if you think we're safer now in the world than we were 6 years ago. I can't find anybody, liberal, Democrat, to conservative Republican, who believes that. In fact, we have a situation right now where our friends no longer trust us and our enemies no longer fear us. It's because we've had a president who continues to disarm America. We need to be focused on that. As a senator, as citizens, we should be critically concerned about how we have disarmed America. We need to support our allies like Israel and be strong in the world. We can't be the police of the world, but we can have a strong military, and we need a leader who's going to do it. I'm not going to take the entire 5 minutes, but I will tell you this. I believe that leaders are born. I believe leaders are called, and we certainly need people that can be managers. We need people that will do a good job of voting right, but we also need people that can go out and sell the conservative message, because it's not enough anymore in this day and time to just be right. And I think where we as conservatives, as Republicans, where we've lost it, it's not enough just to go and vote and say we're right and be right on the issues. Not only do you have to be right, but you have to go out and be right, and you have to go sell it, and you've got to go get other people to believe in it. That's what I did as Speaker of the House. We brought people together, mainstream Republicans. We brought ideological Republicans. We brought constitutional conservatives like myself. We came together. We crafted a budget that focused on core government services, that did not add debt. That's the same thing I'm going to do as your next United States Senator. I'd be honored to have your vote and support. Thank you.
Our third candidate is current U.S. Representative James Lankford, currently a candidate for the United States Senate. James, thank you. Welcome him, please.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm glad y'all are here. How many of you typically come every week or just about every week to OCPAC? Let's see your hands. Okay, how many of you come every quarter or so or haven't come ever before? Let me see your hands. Okay, they meet every week, and you are always welcome. This is a place where the issues get discussed, and so I know there are a lot of folks here that don't normally come here. Just know you're always welcome to be able to be here and to be able to be engaged in the conversation the days ahead. One quick other person that's here I want to be introduced. My wife Cindy is right back over there. She got a chance to be able to join us today as well. We'll talk through just a couple quick issues, and then we'll get into the Q&A time, which I'm looking forward to the questions and get a chance to engage in the issues that you want to be able to talk about. When I went to the U.S. House of Representatives 3 years ago, I didn't come from any kind of political background at all. Me walking out as a private citizen, 22 years of full-time ministry, my focus was how do we help people and how do we get our nation back to where we used to be? It used to be the families were the most important thing. The families took care of the key issues. It used to be local issues were determined locally, and they happened on a local level. It used to be that the states had greater authority, not the federal government. And it used to be that people saw the federal government as their servant, not that we serve the federal government. This turning that's happened both culturally in our nation and politically in our nation has been a rapid turn in the past several years. So for me to step out of full-time ministry, to step into serving people in this role, I saw it in two ways. One was a ministry role. I do still see myself as a minister. I have a responsibility to be able to take the gospel every place I can take it. I know not everyone here is a Christian. Not everyone is going to be able to believe that. But Article 6 of the Constitution says there's no religious test for any officer of the United States. You don't have to have faith or not have it. If you have it, you don't have to take it off when you get there. I don't. So I'm going to continue to be able to walk that faith out while I'm there. I also have a legislative responsibility and an obligation to be able to help our nation in every way that I possibly can. I asked specifically to be on two committees when I got there. The Budget Committee and the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Those two committees in the House of Representatives are ground zero for the major issues that we deal with. I want to be in the thick of the fight. In the Budget Committee, we've been able to push a budget that no one said we could possibly get with Barack Obama and with Harry Reid. We pushed that budget through and for the first time in several years stopped the increase of spending and turned it around. Then did it again the next year. This is the first time since the Korean War that the budget has not increased 2 years in a row. It's gone down. Now, has it gone down enough? No. But I'm also not working with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican executive. We're working with Barack Obama and Harry Reid, and we're finding every spot that we can to begin to return some fiscal sanity on it, and to be able to grab the pendulum that's swinging very far to the left, to be able to grab it and start pulling us back towards the right on this, back where the American people actually are. I got involved in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee because of the overreach of the federal government and what is happening. We need specific accountability, and you've got to get in and not just complain about those things, you've got to actually get into the details and work on them. I walked in, the very first set of hearings was over something called Fast and Furious. And it was the beginning point of holding Eric Holder to account. The Fast and Furious, after the death of one of our border agents, Brian Terry, and the obvious release of these weapons that were allowed to be able to walk as the federal government released these weapons out. They're heading into Mexico and heading into thugs and criminal gangs there, and then coming back and being able to use against American citizens. And it's a bloodbath for how those weapons have been used in Mexico itself. We started the process of holding to account. When it started getting really close to Eric Holder's office, He said, we'll do our own internal investigation on this. At the end of it, he came back and he said, we checked ourselves and we're fine. We said, we want the 80,000 pages that you said you checked, we want to look at those as well. And he said, executive privilege. We subpoenaed those documents, he refused. We recommended contempt of Congress, thank you. We held him in contempt, and now we're going through the court proceedings. It's interesting to me the number of people that catch me and say that's all been dropped. No, it hasn't. We've been through 2 different court proceedings, have won both of them, have a third one that we're now in process. We're going to win that one. After we win that one, there's one more and they'll be dealt with. It's the same process we're going through with Lois Lerner right now. Lois Lerner and the exempt organizations folks at the IRS think they are above the law. They are not above the law. No one is. And we're walking through that process for the IRS to make sure that they know that. We recommended last week that they would be held in, that she would be held in contempt. She cannot come and make a statement and say, I've done nothing wrong, but I'm also taking the fifth. You have the right to remain silent, is true, but you don't have the right to also speak and then remain silent. You can't do both. You can do one or the other. We will continue to hold people to account as we walk this process, whether it be Benghazi, whether it be the IRS, whether it be Fast and Furious, the unfinished work there. There is much to be done in executive oversight, and I look forward to this ongoing conversation. Thanks, y'all.
You want to answer the question, try not to get more than about 10 lined up at any one time, if you would. And I'm going to start the first question while people are getting over there. We'll start with TW first.
15 seconds.
In rotation. Thank you. Okay, here's the question. Wrote it out. From 1951 to 1993, it was European trade agreements which eventually produced the European Union. That supranational government has destroyed the sovereignty of its individual nations and crushed liberty for the people. Currently, the Obama administration is secretly negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Do you believe these efforts are actually free trade rather than economic and political integration, a threat to our sovereignty, or will be good for our economy?
First of all, if you've got Barack Obama at the head doing the negotiating, I've got a problem with it. It's probably going to come out on the wrong end of the spectrum. Secondly, the part of the question that you answered was about secretly. None of this needs to be done in secret. If we're going to be negotiating with other countries, it needs to be done in the openness with the American people so they can see what's happening. The problem we have with this administration is they haven't been open. They won't answer questions. They won't be accountable to the people that put them there. So to answer your question, I certainly believe in the idea of free market principles, and we should be applying those, but under no circumstances should we allow America to be subservient to other countries. That's where we've missed it. We've ceded our sovereignty because of this administration and others, and that's what we need to be focused on getting back. So I'm all for people working and creating things in America and selling them to other countries, but it should be fair and it shouldn't be at the detriment of American workers and at the detriment of the American people, particularly our Constitution.
Been in the thick of actually fighting this issue on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Met with Dave Camp. I'd be able to go through some of the details of it. Currently, that's not pending because of one big issue. There's not any trust for this current president in his negotiations. I do believe we win when we trade with other nations, when we get all the tariffs out that are typically imposed over there. There are 20 different nations that we have a trade agreement with scattered around the world. 18 of those nations, we're in the black in the trade. We send more out than they bring in, we win. When the American worker competes with other nations, we win. The only two that we're not in the black on are Canada and Mexico, and that's because of the purchase of oil from Canada and from Mexico. If you remove just the oil purchase that we do from there, we also beat them. We lose track of this, but other countries do not want to buy from their neighbors because their neighbors cheat them. Americans don't. We have a different moral value in how we do trade and how we do business, and it's extremely beneficial, and other nations want it. Let me bring one other quick thing on this as well. The UK did the right thing by staying out of the EU. That is obvious now in the economy on it. We should never, ever get into a joint currency with any other nation. We run our own currency. It is the world's currency. They can join ours. We're 25% of the world's economy. We do not do any agreement that puts us in any kind of risk on sovereignty at all. We stand alone, and people want to trade with us. They abide by our rules. We don't abide by theirs.
Yeah, the answer is those are a violation of our United States sovereignty and the sovereignty of the state of Oklahoma as well. Back when, many of you will remember this, when we were dealing with a same kind of an issue of property destruction here in the state of Oklahoma with the NAFTA Superhighway. I was the guy that stood and ran legislation. It took me about a year and a half to get this bill pushed through to stop the NAFTA Superhighway coming up from Mexico through Texas into the state of Oklahoma. You realize that would have been the largest private property confiscation in U.S. history. 37,000 acres were at risk right here in Oklahoma. These trade and partnership agreements are not free trade. They're managed trade. They are giving up our sovereignty. They're giving a disadvantage to our businesses here in this country. And the policies coming out of Washington, D.C. is the reason why so many of our companies have become global companies. They're moving overseas. They're moving to China. They're moving to Singapore. They're moving to places to where they can actually do business. We have got to get Washington, D.C. out of our businesses here in Oklahoma.
Yes, sir. First question, try to ask your question in 15 seconds. Go.
A survey that was done 4 years ago showed that 1 in 4 non-citizens, single Muslim men living in America between the ages of 18 and 35 believe that violence is justified in defending Allah or Islam. Do you believe this is a threat to America? And should this age group of non-citizens be deported?
All right, let's talk through a couple different issues. I'll kind of get through as rapidly as I can. I've gone and personally visited a Sharia community in Wales. We lose track of the fact that the UK has experimented with allowing certain pockets of their nation to function under Sharia law. What we should adamantly oppose here in the United States, they've actually done. In that community, the police, excuse me, the bobbies, okay? The bobbies would stop us before we actually go into that area and warn us, we don't patrol this area. They've ceded that area over to it. We should never, ever allow that. We should be aggressive in how we actually manage this. And we as Americans have a difficult process with this because we believe in freedom of religion. We believe every person can have any faith they want to have or no faith at all. That is constitutionally protected. But Islam is different when it's in its most radical form because it's not a religion, it's a governmental system. And they require a governmental control as well as a religious control. A person has a right to a faith, they do not have a right to take over our government and should be prohibited.
Yeah, Sharia law is far surpassing a religion. It is law. That's what it's called, Sharia law. Anything that usurps American law, Oklahoma law, does not have any standing here in this country or in this state. So I believe, Don, that we should actually protect the citizens of our state first, protect the citizens of this country against any kind of insurgency from another unlawful regime coming into this country.
Okay.
Before you talk about Sharia law and deporting anybody, the first thing you got to do when you talk about any immigration issue, you've got to secure the borders. That's first and foremost. We've got to secure the borders in Oklahoma, in this country. In Oklahoma, we actually voted, while I was Speaker, while I was a member, we voted against Sharia law to keep it out of our court system, to keep it out of Oklahoma. So I have a record on that. The second thing is, we've got to be committed to no amnesty. We cannot reward bad behavior in this country under no circumstances should we ever. So as it relates to these individuals, if somebody posing a threat to this country and they're not supposed to be here, we should get rid of them. There's no question about that for sure as well. But certainly as it relates to the issue of immigration, which I think is the bigger issue, we should say no to amnesty and we should secure our borders.
Next speaker.
We hear politicians talk about a balanced budget and cutting spending. How can we ever hope to get control of our deficit spending and economy when the privately owned quasi-government and unaccountable Federal Reserve has the ability to borrow, print, and infuse trillions of dollars into our economy, as well as control our M1, 2, and 3 money supply?
Well, the short answer to that, number one, we have to begin by auditing the Fed. That's first. This goes to the crux of the problem here with Washington, D.C. politicians continue to shirk their responsibility and hand it off to unelected GOAs, governing bodies that should not even be there. Audit the Fed would be the first place that I would recommend we head to find out how much we're actually worth.
I agree with that. We need to audit the feds for sure, but we need to return back to the Constitution. That's where this real problem is happening. Most of the problems we have, in fact, 90% of our problems could be fixed if we would get rid of 90% of our federal government. That's the big challenge that we have. Even more important than that, though, what we need are people who are going to go to Washington, D.C., represent Oklahoma values, and balance our budget, and make sure that we reduce our deficit. We do it in our own personal budgets, we do it in our business budgets, we do it at the state level. That's what we need to be focused on. And yes, we should audit the feds as well.
Great question on it. Thanks for tracking monetary policy. That's something a lot of people do not track and is extremely important to us as a nation. Absolutely, both these guys said auditing the Fed, I'm on record, pushing for that and trying to say we've got to be able to have greater transparency on that. It's important who gets appointed to be able to lead this. With Janet Yellen leading it at this point, I would pick someone different, more like Esther George, who actually does the Kansas City Federal Reserve. Esther George is one of those folks that's trying to turn off the money supply being poured into the middle of this. She would have been a much better leader than Janet Yellen on that. If you ever have an opportunity to be able to visit with Esther George, you should take it. Because she lines up with the conservative principles of how the monetary supply should be done, that we're not constantly tinkering with it. The other thing is we've got to remove from the Federal Reserve, once we audit it, we've got to remove from them this mandate that they have to increase employment. Okay, that should not be the responsibility of our monetary system to be able to tinker with our money going up and down to quote unquote create jobs. Jobs come out of companies, they come out of policy, they don't come out of a select group of folks within the Federal Reserve that no one has access to be able to turn our economy up and down. And the third thing is, we're going to get that when we shift presidents. We've got to have a different president on that, because this president does the selection. This president, because he and I have had that conversation, this president does not believe we should ever balance the budget. I've asked him point blank on it. He said no, it was a good idea in the 90s. It's not a good idea now. I adamantly disagree, and I told him so. We've got to get back to balancing the budget.
My name is Jerome. Just this week, a study was released to show only 38% of naturalized citizens vote Republican. If we fail to limit the number of legal immigrants or make a pathway to citizenship for over 12 million illegal aliens, how do Republicans ever hope to win the presidency 15 or so years from now?
Like I mentioned before, we need to secure the borders and say no to amnesty. I voted for House Bill 1804. When the federal government failed to do its duty, we in the state took action. We did that in Oklahoma, and that's why I voted and supported House Bill 1804 a few years back. But even greater than that, moving forward, the way that we win elections is we go out there and we tell the story that free market enterprise still works. We tell the story that the greatest number of people that have gotten off of welfare, that have gotten away from dependency and generational poverty, came through our system, a free market system that values work ethic, and that is part of the American dream. That's how we go win elections. And we need people and messengers that can go deliver that message, because what we've done before, we've been content with just being right. It's not enough just to be right, to neighbors who are right. You've got to go out there and tell the story. And if you talk to immigrants that have come here legally, most of them have done a great job of catching on to our values, adopting our values, and using it for future generations. That's what we want, and that's how you win elections, not by new future government programs.
Let's start with some basics on it. We should not have amnesty. That shouldn't be in the vocabulary. That shouldn't be out there as a possibility on it. Second thing is, we've got to find a way to be able to solve a very busted up, very bad immigration system. I have folks that say to me, well, let's just enforce the laws that are on the books. I'll say, okay, let's start with a couple of laws that are on the books. Crossing a border right now illegally is a misdemeanor. That's the current law of the land. Should that be a misdemeanor to cross our border illegally? I don't think so. Right now, with current application of the law, there are so many issues that are out there in the current application of the law that are major problems that we've got to be able to clean those up and to be able to deal with those. My focus has been that we had 3 million people here illegally in the 1980s. We have 11 or 12 million who knows what the real number is here now. This does not get better by continuing to ignore it. There's a whole group of folks that say, just don't do anything, it'll enforce the law and it'll be fine on it from there. We do have to engage in this. This is what leadership requires to be able to deal with a very difficult problem that does need to be dealt with, starting with your basics of border security, dealing with that we're not going to have amnesty, and then dealing with people that are here that have gone through legally. You talk to someone who's here legally, they have a very different perspective than someone who crossed the border illegally on that as far as where they're going and what they believe politically and all those things. We as Republicans and as conservatives, we win when we show up. And I've talked to quite a few folks in the Latino community that will tell me Republicans never show up at our meetings. So of course we're Democrats because those are the only people that we know in politics. That is our mistake. They're pro-life, they're pro-starting businesses, entrepreneurial. Those are Republican values. Okay, this is not trying to impress people into something. This is who we are as conservatives for limited government. But many of them come from governmental systems where it's big government systems, and that's what our government's becoming. We've got to get back to our constitutional construct of limited government and tell them that if you're here legally, we want you to be able to work, and we want you to be able to vote with us because we're right on the issues that you also share.
We have a serious problem with illegal immigration because the politicians in Washington, D.C. really don't care about the issue. They don't care about what's happening here in Oklahoma or Texas or New Mexico. They don't really care that there's an influx of illegals coming. It's not fixed because they don't want it fixed. And the Republicans have their reasons for wanting cheap labor. The Democrats have their reasons for wanting free votes. So here's the situation. If we're going to fix the immigration problem, and it's severe, it's going to take some very bold, courageous leadership to do it. I've got an immigration plan. Number one, we do secure the borders. As a matter of fact, let me take it a little further. Let's just close the borders until they're secure. Let's stop the influx. The second thing we have to do is we have to get rid of this dangerous lottery system to bring people over into this country. 50,000 people every year come into this country. We have no idea the benefit that they bring. We have no idea if they're going to be a drain on society or if they're going to be a benefit to our society. We better get rid of this very dangerous lottery system that has been in place for the last 50 or 60 years. Close the borders, get rid of the lottery system, and the third thing is when we do have legal immigrants, track their visas. Put a chip in it. If we can fly drones over to check on American citizens, surely we can track illegal aliens.
Hi guys. As of today, if you're elected to the United States Senate, have you decided if you will support Mitch McConnell should he win his re-election and he decides to run to be leader? Will you support him, or will you vote for him, or will you choose another?
Great question, Rhonda. No one, we don't know if he's going to win his primary because that's still hanging out there. I think that's sometime at the end of May on that. No, I've not made a decision on that because I don't know who else is running in the matter. So here's the grand challenge. There's an internal election that happens, and then there's a public election that happens. Internally, all those folks actually come up and say, I'm actually going to run. There's a big difference between someone saying, I'm going to vote against someone, and no one ever stands up to actually run against them.
Right.
A lot of folks talk big, and then you actually get in the private meeting and actually have the internal elections, and no one does anything. I watched that last time when we had this election for the Speaker of the House. No one ran. In fact, in the Speaker of the House election that actually occurred in the private meeting, there was only one person in that meeting that voted no, and that was Louis Gohmert. So that's the grand challenge that we have, is when it really gets determined and really gets decided, only you got to actually have who's going to actually stand up and run in the middle of it, and I'm going to watch and see who that is. I will vote for the most conservative candidate that comes up and actually runs.
Well, this is an easy one for me. There is no way under any circumstances will I support Mitch McConnell for leader. And what you just heard is a classic soft shoe shuffle with the Republican leadership. I'm not going to be involved with that. I will find someone who is conservative, if I'm serving you in the United States Senate, to support, encourage, and get them to run against Mitch McConnell. Why in the world would I even consider voting for a man who is destroying the very value and the tenets of the Republican Party and dragging our country into the financial gutter? I will not support Mitch McConnell. I will find somebody that I can support that is a conservative.
I'll tell you exactly what I'll support for later. I'm going to vote for the person who's going to say no to debt, say no to increased spending, and say no to allowing illegals to come into our country. That's who I'm going to vote for. And the last time I was involved in a legislative election, and it was a leadership election, I didn't like the choices. So you know what I did? I ran myself and I became speaker. And so I don't know who I'm going to vote for. If it's between Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, it's going to be a real tough decision. But it's not real tough with me. If there's no one in there that represents my values, I'll run myself.
There you go.
All right, gentlemen, we will assume that all of you believe that it is the right of every citizen to own and carry a weapon, a firearm. What I'd like to hear from each candidate is an explanation. Explain to us or justify to us using philosophy, reason, or morality where that right comes from. And then give us an example of the practical ramifications of your view. Is it proper for the national government to limit that right in any way? And if so, give us a specific example of a limitation that you think is legitimate.
Well, first of all, the Second Amendment is a prohibition of the federal government to infringe on our rights to keep and bear arms. Shall not infringe. It's pretty clear. It's not, doesn't have anything to do with the state of Oklahoma. The state of Oklahoma can set rules as they want, but shall not infringe is very clear in the Second Amendment. A practical solution that I did in the state Senate, I ran legislation, and you would have thought the world had fallen apart, but I ran legislation to protect our students on campus, to give people the opportunity to have a concealed carry when they went to school on the university level. The university presidents came out in full force against that, but you know what? My son just got out of the military, out of the Marine Corps, and if he had been sitting in the back room at OU like he did, I would have felt relatively secure knowing that my son was carrying a gun on campus. He would have been able to prevent a problem. There's a lot of good folks that are fully trained and know how to use that weapon, and we have the inherent right given to us from God to protect our family, and government has no authority to take that away.
I hear people talk about their constitutional right and all the time, and this is not a constitutional right, it's a God-given right. The Constitution only guarantees rights, it doesn't give rights, and that's, I think, a critical distinction. So I believe that right comes from God. Our right and our ability to bear arms and protect our families is God-given, and we should do everything we can to protect it and support it. That's why, as a representative, as a leader, I have an A rating from the NRA. I've been a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment and will continue to do so. And I believe that philosophy guarantees all other rights that are in the Constitution. They're guaranteed by the Second Amendment and our right to protect our own selves. Governments form for the ability and protection of people and its citizens and their rights. That's what it's supposed to be about. And you should have the right, and you do have the right, God-given right, to protect yourself and your family. That's why we voted to move from a concealed carry to an open carry in Oklahoma, a law that I supported, and other measures that are pro-gun rights. So I believe it's a God-given right and one that we need to do everything we can to protect.
We can go back to the philosophy. You walked off there. Well, awesome. There you are, right there. Thank you. Turn to look and you were gone, John. Go back to the basic Declaration of Independence. This pursuit, this life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's this basic thing that we saw inherent within our system. That's what we have this ability to be able to have. You take that all the way down to the Second Amendment. Why is that there? Because we have this inherent right to life. That in its earliest forms was a protection. We have a weapon to protect our own lives and our own families. And it was an extension of this basic right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To protect my life, protect my liberty, protect my pursuit of happiness, I also have the right to be able to keep and bear arms as well. From the very beginning, that has been true for us as a nation, even before we were a nation. That was inherent of what we were all about, that we had that right. And I have this argument all the time with people in D.C. about all kinds of concealed carry issues and everything else, and I go back to this basic thing. Before we were a nation, we had weapons in our homes, we carried weapons on our persons. This is inherent with who we are. In fact, I had a back and forth with a member from New York. You remember when the newspaper published in New York a map of all the homes that had a weapons permit there? He started talking to me about that. I said, well, we've had that in Oklahoma for a long time. And he said, you do? I said, yeah, it's called Google Earth, okay? Look at every house in Oklahoma. There's at least one weapon in it, okay? So with many, you can pick how many bedrooms, you can also pick how many weapons are there. So this is not an issue for us. So this belief that if there are all these weapons and there's going to be all this risk, come to Oklahoma. It's one of the safest places to be able to be, and they should learn a lot from us.
Unfortunately, this is the last question here. Last question.
1945, Congress passed the United Nations Participation Act, and in that there's one key sentence where the Congress told the President, you want to go to war, you're not required to go to Congress, you can go to the UN Security Council. My question for you is, if you're elected senator, U.S. Senator, would you agree to work to repeal that one line? It's the top line highlighted.
They don't have it.
Our founding father, George Washington, said that we should not be involved in any entangling alliances. We should get out of the UN and get out now.
We talked through several issues on this. One is the UN, I've made the statement often, that the UN had its time and that time is gone. It is now a waste of government taxpayer money. We are propping the whole thing up. There are lots of ways to be able to communicate and do negotiations with other nations without having to go through that organization on it. As far as the issue of going to war, Federalist Paper 69 is very specific on this. When you get in the Federalist Papers, it outlines what rights will this president have when the government is actually formed, what right will they have to actually take us to war. It outlined very specifically, the president will have fewer abilities to take us to war than it listed than the governor of New York. The governor of New York can call up their militia and run their militia. A president of the United States does not have that authority. The president cannot call up forces, only commands them when they're in the field. They're the commander-in-chief. It is very clear from the Constitution that the legislative branch is engaged in the declaration of war. The executive branch is the one who actually executes the war. That system has been corrupted over the years, and we've got to get back to it. I have a bill that actually pushes that back, that I worked with several different gentlemen on in the House of Representatives to say, we've got to get back to the basic functioning of how we happen constitutionally and not allow our president to take us to war and run the war. The American people decide through their representatives whether we're to go into wartime.
Well, certainly anything that takes away our sovereignty as a country, as a free people, I'm against it. And that includes the United Nations. I think we should shut the United Nations down, run them out of New York City, and let us take care of ourselves. But this goes to a much larger issue. It goes to the issue of liberty, the thing that I've been talking about now for the last decade of my life. You know, when I talk about smaller government, I mean it. When other politicians, we've heard it today, they talk about limited government and smaller government, yet when Representative Lankford voted to increase the debt limit $4.5 trillion in just 3 votes in the last 3 years, that is not smaller government. When Speaker Shannon says that he wants to limit the growth and the size of government, yet he increased the state budget as Speaker of the House $300 million, that's not shrinking the size of government.
That's kind of off question.
Well,
You'll have a minute wrap up.
Liberty and sovereignty belongs to the United States of America. We should never give our liberty or sovereignty away through taxes or through some other body like the United Nations.
Okay. All right. We have 1 minute wrap up, starting with Representative Lankford. 1 minute.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for being here. I do know, when I've come to OCPAC and multiple times before, there's a great variety of opinions here. That's a good, healthy thing for us. This is what America looks like. We don't all have to see things exactly the same way. We all have this common passion, though, with this organization is how do we move us from where we are as a nation right now, swinging to the left? How do we get us back to where we should be with a basic constitutional construct and with a balanced budget? What are the steps it's going to take to actually get there? Now, there's a path that has to be set to say, we are here now, here's the reality of where we are, how do we get to there? My focus has been, I don't want to just yell against the machine over there and say there's problems. Everyone sees the problems. Everyone hates Obamacare. Everyone hates the debt. Everyone hates the direction this federal government is going because it's taking away the power from the individual. I want to say that's where we need to be. What are the steps to get there? Let's get to work. Let's do the study that's required, and let's actually get it done. Thanks y'all very much. We very much appreciate your vote.
Okay, Senator, 1 minute.
I think it's important to look at our records to see where we're going to go in the future. We all have a voting record. When I talk about limited government, I ran a bill to eliminate the state income tax. When I talk about protecting the citizens' rights to vote, I ran ballot access. I ran legislation to stop the NAFTA superhighway. To protect your identity, I passed legislation to repeal the Real ID Act. These are real solutions to real problems. I will attack with the same vigor, the same intensity in Washington, D.C. I will fight back from within the belly of the beast to stop the encroachment of the federal government on the citizens of this state. I would humbly ask you for your support and your vote on June the 24th. Thank you and God bless you.
Friends, no leader in Oklahoma has done more in the area of states' rights than I have as Speaker of the House for the state of Oklahoma. Whether it was creating the States' Rights Committee, whether it was saying no to the Obamacare Medicaid expansion, or whether it was saying no and moving to nullify Obamacare, we did that while I was Speaker of the House. And we did it under intense pressure from those within our party and those without. That's the kind of leader that I believe you're looking for in your next United States Senator. Somebody who's going to say no to the debt, no to more spending, and no to the liberal agenda of Washington. In Washington, the big challenge you have, it's the culture. It is so intoxicating, and oftentimes you're talking more to tax consumers than you are taxpayers, and that's the great challenge you have. Who's going to stand up and say no and represent Oklahoma values even under pressure? It's not enough just to say, with all due respect, I passed legislation, I introduced legislation. That's nice. Were you able to get it done and get it passed into law and move Oklahoma, move this nation in the right direction? That's what we need, a leader like that. I believe I'm that guy, and I'd be honored to have your support. Thank you.
Please listen to me. If you need to leave, please do so as quietly as possible. If you please start casting your votes right now. If you are a dues-paying member of OCPAC and you've not received a white, please do not visit with one another. Please remain silent and give us this time to collect these votes. If I could have your attention for just a minute. The outcome is Senator Brogdon has 59%, Representative Shannon 15%, and Congressman Lankford 26%. I don't know what the percent is on this. 4 no endorsement votes. So Senator Brogdon, congratulations. We are now counting the yellow ballots, and we will see how close that comes out to the voting members. Thank you so much for coming. By the way, if you do not receive my email on a weekly basis, we have a sign-up sheet here. We have membership forms, and we'll be meeting again next week. Thank you.